If we're not communicating, we're not doing our jobs well, and frankly, the company is going to be losing money.
It's a fascinating and very, very challenging topic because it's so relative and it's also personal.
What if 70% of your workforce was disengaged because they did not know where they stood in relation to company goals?
Corporate trust can only be effective if people know where they stand.
Welcome to Primal HR. Real people, real talk, real HR. The human side of work from the people who live it every day. Here are your hosts, longtime HR leader Terry Smith and People First strategist Leslie Lulham.
Hey everybody, welcome back. This is our latest episode of Primal HR Podcast, and I am here with my outstanding, fabulous Leslie co-host and the equally outstanding, fabulous Tim, the producer, and we are going to be talking today about something very, very key and so often overlooked and even more often ineffective. Internal communication between teams, between groups, between leaders and staff, and all of those things. And so I'm going to hand it to Leslie because I can see the fire in her eye.
Leslie has a lot to say on this one. Communication, I feel like, is like a good user interface, UX design. When it's really good, it's like breathing and everything is great. When it's bad, you notice. And you notice immediately. And when you work on HR, you hear about it.
Oh, yeah.
And so before we jump in, I have some stats that I would like to share. And they're pretty surprising, I think. One report says that communication barriers cost the 400 largest U.S. and U.K. companies more than $37 billion per year. Imagine how much money they would save if they had effective communication. What if we look at just U.S.-based companies? That cost, this is speculation, okay, but that cost could be as high as $1.2 trillion annually because of poor communication. We talked about onboarding in our last episode and how crucial that is. Communication is a big part of the employee experience. 61% of employees who are unlikely to stay in their job cite poor internal communication as a key reason for wanting to leave. That could be you're not being communicated with about your goals, what you should be working on. That could mean upper management is making a lot of changes and they're not communicating. That could be communication between teams. That could go every which way. But if we're not communicating, we're not doing our jobs well. And frankly, the company is going to be losing money. Really
worthwhile to dig into this a lot because, number one, I have found in my career that communication is relative. And the thing that can just really, really stop things cold is when somebody says, well, I am communicating, right? Mm-hmm. And somebody else says, well, no, you're not. And then the fundamental of, well, what is good communication for you or good communication for you or you or you, comes into play in this whole thing. Because I've run into so many people who would tell you, I'm a great communicator. And the evidence does not back it up. It just doesn't. And that's a hard conversation to have with somebody because they think they're doing great. Right. And they may not be doing great. Or for that matter, they may be doing well in some ways, but not in others. Right? And so it's a fascinating and very, very challenging topic because it's so relative and it's also personal.
It is.
I mean, I can think of numerous folks that I've worked with over the years who think I am a great communicator. And my question would be, and on what data do you base that assumption? Because I don't see it. And yet it could be that I'm just not able to receive that person's communications effectively. So it's a really interesting game to play, I think that, and I think the thing that's very, very important for anybody who, professes good communication skills is that at least a half of that or more has to be their listening skills.
active listening is huge. Before I get into the ranty part, yesterday I was having a conversation with another professional in my sphere of people that I talk to, and they are one of the best managers that I know. And they were talking to HR, and they said, oh yeah, whenever I'm onboarding into a new team or I have a new employee onboarding with me, one of the first questions I ask them is, how do you like to be communicated with? My little HR heart just stopped and expanded 3 sizes, because you don't hear that often enough of how do you like to be communicated with. Some people like verbal, some people like written, Slack, email, I don't know, carrier pigeon. But you do have to tailor communication, and that only works if you're communicating. Mm-hmm. If Terry's like, I love to be communicated by email, and I never talk to him over email, then I'm not doing a good job communicating. I called him 45 times. All right. That's not his preferred style. So you have to be cognizant. And I know you can't do it the way someone likes 100% of the time, but it's also on you as a manager or someone working with people within your company to know what that looks like.
It's true, and there's so much nuance to the process that is out of your control. For example, communication between people who come from different societies, different groups, different cultures. Somebody in the South in America and somebody from Seattle are probably going to have some built-in communication barriers because they simply don't know all the nuances. Somebody from Seattle who was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest does not have the cultural background of somebody from Mississippi.
Absolutely. Same thing with U.S. and EU.
Yeah.
People in the EU, like, we're all chatty over here. Hi, how are you? How's the weather? Let's talk about all the things. We talk in grocery store lines. We talk at the gas station. We talk in our sleep, And then when you're in the EU, it is very atypical to engage in small talk. And so when you put that even in a corporate environment, when you're working in companies that work in both continents, sometimes the communication between the two, and I've experienced this myself managing teams on continents, across continents, is the perception of each other you have to actively manage it because it's just societal norm. It's very, very fascinating.
I give a lot of credit to people who take the time to understand, what the context is, right? Like the person that you just described, right? How do you like being, communicated with? That's a great first step, and it's an ongoing process. It's an evolution, and I think that particularly in corporate environments where there's a lot of communication from senior leadership to staff, right? Or we like to think there is. And what does that consist of? How is it played out? How does large messaging get executed in a corporate setting? How does a VP interact with her team, right? And what are the expectations there? That's the other thing too. What are sort of the cultural expectations in the organization of how we communicate here? How culture? How do we get things done here? Includes how do we communicate with each other? Right? How do we get things done between you and I, and between that team and this team, and so on? Right.
And I think you and I talk about this a lot.
Yeah.
Whenever we're talking about HR, we always point up to the C-suite.
Right.
Communication starts at the top. If your executives and VPs and leadership layer are not communicating, it's going to be chaos. The rest of the company is going to be chaos, and then they're not going to communicate with each other. I've worked at a number of companies. One company that comes to mind was amazing at communication. We set KPIs. They were using the SMART method of goals, which I still really love. And it trickled down into our performance reviews when we would finish our performance reviews, and then we would write goals supporting the company goals. And you felt very plugged in. They perhaps even over communicated. We had screens around the office showing our progress to the metrics. They tied really fun benefits into hitting these goals. Everyone was highly motivated. You knew exactly where you were, and it was incredible. Mm-hmm. You knew where you stood. You knew how your work fit into the bigger picture. Wonderful. On the flip side, I've worked at companies where they set a corporate goal, and 2 years later, you're still wondering, hey, whatever happened to that goal? Or
right.
Did something change? And it made for a very difficult work environment because the visibility wasn't there across the org. Now, companies have their reasons for sharing or not sharing. And you know what? As a leader at a company, that's absolutely your prerogative.
Right.
But guess who has another stat? Continual updates from senior leadership drive engagement by 70%.
Nice.
For employees. 70%.
That's a pretty spectacular number.
I'm sitting here like Peter Pan with my hands on it. You could be leaving money on the table.
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Think about the inverse of that number.
Yes.
Right? Think about if your communications are poor and ineffective, what does that inverse number look like?
What if 70% of your workforce was disengaged because they did not know where they stood in relation to company goals? That is terrifying, actually, to think. I mean,
well,
Carrie and I both own our own companies, too. That thought.
Yeah.
I will lose sleep over hypothesizing. I had a lot of Red Bull today, you guys, about that. That is terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. And truth to tell, if you're really dealing at that kind of percentage, your days are numbered as an organization.
Yeah.
Your days are numbered because
there's not a lot left.
Well, and here's the deal. Not only is the engagement a factor, but fundamentally, communication equals trust.
Yes.
Corporate trust can only be effective, and it can only work if people know where they stand. They have to know where they stand. They have to know what's happening with the organization. They have to know what their role is. How can they help move the needle, right? And that is all about how effective leaders are at communicating the goals and objectives. And that, not just in a big picture, like you say, like a year from now, oh, gee, we didn't do that, or 2 years from now, oh, we missed that target. Need to know, in real time.
Absolutely.
In real time. And I find it very unfortunate that so many organizations will do a grand show of, charts and graphs and spreadsheets, and here's what the numbers look like, and we all got to march to those numbers, and then it's crickets for weeks.
You have to follow up.
You have to follow up.
You have to follow up. And I think one thing, kind of like how we were talking about in our Now You Are the Leader episode, and how management is a skill.
Yeah.
Communication is a skill.
Yes.
You have to learn how to do it. You have to be thoughtful and proactive. Be willing to defend what you're talking about, and be willing to get uncomfortable sometimes.
Well, not only willing, but able to defend.
You will. You will have to defend what you're saying.
Yeah, so you better be capable of defending it. And yes, you're right. Sometimes that gets uncomfortable. But that's part of communication.
Yeah.
That's part of what drives a machine forward is let's ask those hard questions. And let's not be afraid of those hard questions.
Yeah.
Unlike some people in government these days. The simple fact is that you have to be able to engender, not create, but encourage and engender trust.
Yep.
You can't create trust where nothing exists. You have to start with something and build on it. Right?
Absolutely. And now for all the HR folks, our jobs are all about communication.
100%.
You're communicating up, you're communicating down, you're communicating sideways, and you're communicating in mass scales.
Yes.
And also in the digital age, we were talking about this last week when we were talking about communication. The color of your communication matters. And what I mean is you can say, that's great. And it can be read as, that's great. That's great.
Yeah.
All the ways. And so there is something to be said also for, you do have to set communication guidelines within companies too. This is how we communicate. And I can't tell you how many times I've seen on company communication manifestos or whatever you want to call it, like assume positive intent. When we're digitally communicating in Slack, email, text, like if you look at how even the different generations communicate, right? Gen Z versus millennial versus Gen X versus boomers, we all communicate very differently.
Yes.
And you see that in the HR world, just in like you're getting email responses from candidates and managers and everything. And like, I feel like it is a very critical thing for us to be able to decipher. Like in HR, you have to assume positive intent, or you will end up crying in a corner, frankly. But all of this works together. And if the company isn't focusing on communication and doing it, at the end of the day, it's going to be a crappy place to work. It's going to be a bad work environment, and no one's going to trust you, and you're leaving money on the table. I could keep going, but I think I'll save that for another episode.
Okay. So there we have it. Communication and what works, what doesn't, why it's important to be effective communicators. Trying to understand a little bit more about the nuance of communication. I mean, this is the sort of thing that they do seminars, webinars, training programs, entire college courses on communication skills. And yes, communication is a skill. But fundamentally, you got to start with the basics, which are the skills of building trust.
Yes.
All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about compensation, what it is, what it isn't, and things like that.
Come check us out.
You've been listening to Primal HR. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Join the conversation on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Primal HR Podcast. Show notes and more at primalhrpodcast.com. Got a topic or want to join us on the show? Reach out. Our email is hello@primalhrpodcast.com. We'll see you next time.